Here we go. Today, January 8th, and we're doing Genesis 15 and 16, Psalms 8. Psalms 8 is actually a very beautiful psalm. It's one of the most popular psalms next to, the 23rd Psalm, in which he says, "O Lord, O my Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth." You know, one of them that's been sung by several Christian artists in several different ways over the years. I think of Keith Green did a very good rendering of this text. The Psalms, like many of the scriptures, are actually well written for memory and for mnemonics, and for tunability. You can sing a lot of these psalms pretty well because there's a certain phraseology. If you listen, "O Lord, my Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth," it seems to create a flow. It's not like reading a textbook or not like reading a historical book, a treatise. And really, the vast majority of the Bible is written in a very nice pentameter to where you could, there's an easy mnemonic. It's almost like the verses or the parts of the verses are made to fit within a person's breath. If you go back to Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Here, the pentameter. Here, it kind of moves up and then comes down, moves up and comes down. That is actually very well for memory. You know, try memorizing something from a textbook, even a historical textbook, and you'll find it difficult. The Bible is actually made by the translators into English to be very readable, to be very rememberable, and it's easier to memorize. It's easier to teach. It's easier for average people to teach. And that was the goal. The goal was to take the scriptures out of the hands of the church clergy and hand it directly to the people in the church, the laity, so to speak. I really don't like saying clergy and laity. It makes it sound like it's a class where you have some people are smarter than others, some people know more than others. Well, take this book, read it, and you'll find it to be very beautiful and memorable and easier to memorize. This takes a little bit of work, but the pentameter, the phraseology, is there to help you remember it. And some of this is why the Bible also, many of our phraseologies are in our culture, like the apple of a guy's eye, handwriting on the wall kind of thing. You'll hear these every now and again in culture and in movies. So, but yeah, look at Psalms 8. It says, "What is man that you're mindful of him? What is the Son of Man that thou visitest him?" The idea that who am I for you to come down and actually pay attention to me? It's a good thing the deists are wrong. God's not up there just sitting around staring in the sky and like, oh, wait. I've got some people on that earth. I better go pay attention. It's different. But who are we? Who are we, a sinful people? Who are we, of people of iniquity, that this God would stop and take time for us? It's a very nice psalm, and if you think about its words, it has a very deep meaning. Genesis 15 and 16, a very interesting book. The first chapter, 15, is more about the establishment of the promise that God made to Abraham that he would have a seed. And God, Abram, he's Abram right now. He hasn't had his name changed. I gotta remind myself of that. But he goes with his plan. Well, I've got a guy named Eleazar. He's my steward. You could make a nation through him. How many times do we start to give up? How many times do we want to give God our plan because we look at his and go, well, I'm not sure it's coming about. So, but no, God reaffirms his commitment to the idea of the seed through Abram. And he does this by creating this sacrifice, a special sacrifice, in which he takes the animals. Abram cuts them up with a blood sacrifice to create a covenant. And Abram watches over that covenant. He keeps that covenant safe. He keeps the animals and the scavengers away from these animal pieces, so to speak. Then he's put into a deep sleep. And God walks through the pieces. This is an idea of God establishing a covenant. But he's not establishing a covenant with Abram. He's establishing a covenant with himself. Because Abram's asleep. He established this covenant with himself that he will bring about a son. And he will do this. And that Abram will be the beneficiary. He is not a responsible party in this. And if you think about it, that's what Christianity is. Christianity is a covenant between God and Jesus, and we are the beneficiaries. But we are not a part of that covenant. We are not signing on any dotted line. When Jesus says, "Come to me, all you weak and heavy laden." And at the end in Revelation where he says, "Anyone who may come, come." Sign on the beneficiary line. So, that's cool. And he also gives him a little bit of prophecy about his life and about the life of his seed. He says they will go into another nation for 400 years. They will be mistreated. Then they will come out. And he has his reasons for doing that. He says because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. You get the idea that God doesn't like to go in and wipe out nations until he's worked with them to the point to where they will no longer turn to him. So there's that crypticism there. There's even a sense of, in modern world, there's called the iniquity of the Gentiles. Until the iniquity of the Gentiles has come in, you see these parallels, that God is still working with the Gentiles through the church. But it seems like there'll be a day when the Gentiles go, "We don't want this Jesus person," to the extent to where he moves away. Same thing happens with the Amorites. There's a nice parallel there. So Abram is given this promise. He sees the covenant. He helps create the covenant, the pieces, but he doesn't ratify. That's different. He doesn't ratify the covenant. That's a different thing. To create the covenant, as God had commanded him to, was one thing. But he didn't ratify it. God did. So 15 is strengthening him. And so, but he's got a long road, because it's going to be another 20 years before he has this child. And like a lot of people, if God makes a promise today, I'd like for him to keep it today. And God doesn't do that. He keeps it when he's ready. You just got to hold on. When you look at 16, this is, of course, with Sarai. His name has not been changed yet. And this is also about Hagar, the mistress. And it's an interesting piece because showing where the flesh gets weary and the flesh wants to do it itself. Now, Sarai was wrong to do this, but also here's an idea of a man listening to his wife. This doesn't mean this isn't anti-wife, but man should stick with the promises that God made him, not the ratifications that women will try to bring to the equation. So that's what happened here. Women tried to change the equation, and God did not want man to do that. So, yes, I hold them both accountable. I'm not blaming Sarai. And she put up with a lot. Here she is following him around. Once again, pulling up, moving around, living in this tent, which I believe, like I've said several times, is like a tabernacle, a wooden structure. I can't keep ratifying. I can't keep saying that enough, because in my mind, like a lot of good Christians, we see them living in a tent that looks like something out of a circus tent. That's not how that was. But she gets tired of waiting. Her idea is to take Hagar. Why don't you go lay with my handmaiden and have a child by her, and I'll just claim that child, and there we go. Because she was getting impatient. She was waiting. He gave in. Now, we don't know how long she pushed him on this. Even though the Bible says it once, she could have been doing this for years at a time, and he finally threw up his hands. But that's his fault, not hers. And he goes into Hagar, and he has Ishmael. Now, this Ishmael is not connected to Muhammad. Muhammad connected his star to Ishmael. We don't know what happened to the people of Ishmael, because they did not keep themselves separate. They did not keep themselves in family units. So instead, they just got absorbed into the nations. I mean, think about George Washington's heirs, his descendants. Did they stay in one family? No. Can anyone trace themselves back to George Washington? Well, probably thousands of people can if you made a family tree. So can people in Arabia and that part of the country trace them back to Ishmael? But they did not keep the lineage. So there's no way to know. There's no way to verify in any kind of historical record or any kind of genealogy which person is kin to Ishmael. By the time Ishmael had come along, there were hundreds of thousands of people on the earth. Probably in that area, there were tens of thousands. And he was just one of many having families. So no, there's no way to connect anyone to Ishmael. He did not keep himself separate. This is one of the reasons why when we go through a Bible study, we have to go through these genealogies. This is why there are two genealogies for Jesus. One through his dad, his stepdad, and the one through his step-grandfather. You look at both Matthew 1 and Luke 1, you'll see that there are two different men listed as grandfathers. But in that day, if your biological dad died, you were raised by another man of that same tribe. And in that family, probably a brother or a cousin. But you see, so that's why there's two different lineages. One of them was legal. When you go to the temple, there's a legal reckoning of who you legally are. The other one would be familiar. I myself had two dads. One of them was biological. He left the scene. The other one was legal. He was the one who raised me, but he didn't sire me. So that's a good analogy right there. So Hagar is mistreated by Sarai, leaves, but God comes along to her and tells her to go back and to submit to her mistress. And this is interesting. She doesn't say, well, I'm going to go change the heart of Sarai to treat you nicer. You just go back home. No, you go home and submit. Even if she's mean, you go home and submit. But it does give a prophecy for Ishmael that he will be a wild man. And that he will grow himself to be a nation. But this nation is not distinct. Many of the nations might be kin to Ishmael, but there's no way to know. Later on, when we see the naming of the nations, we see Esau in the Edomites. We see Ammon and Moab, which came from the daughters of Lot, which we'll get to. But we don't have any nation that's called the Ishmaelites. Now, the Ishmaelites did exist as a tribe because they were the ones who they purchased Joseph from his brothers when we get over to Genesis 40. So they're together as a tribe, but they're not together as a nation. And there were a lot of people who were tribes that were not nations. It's a different idea. But anyway, Hagar goes back. We don't know exactly what happens. I don't know if Sarai ever works well with Hagar. So I'm not sure how that relationship went. I'm beginning to think that anytime you try to, in the flesh, do something to help God, you create tension that just does not go away. And then we were told that Abram is like 86 years old, somewhere in his mid-80s, and he won't have Isaac for another decade. So he's got 10 years of this now to deal with. And he's got a son who's in the mix that he does grow to love. I don't think, but the promise will come from Isaac. That's a different thing. There's no evidence that he hated Ishmael. Ishmael would be about a decade older than Isaac. So we get an idea of that. So he would be like 12 or 13 when Isaac is born to Sarah. How he felt about all this, what he thought about all of this, I don't know. I need to go do a word study and see what his name means. And I need to go back and see, did God name Ishmael? Which God names things on purpose. God, when God cares about something, when God wants to use something, he gives it a name. But that doesn't mean it's tied to Mohammedanism or any of the swordplay or any of the theology of that man. It just means that Ishmael existed, and he could have been a lover and a follower of the one true God, for all we know. We can't attribute evil to him just because someone takes his name and bad things happen because of that. We don't have a history, and the Islamics don't have a history of this man. All we have is what's in the Bible, and maybe Josephus has a little bit more of insight, but outside of that, everything else is speculation, tradition, stories, unverifiable. The Bible and Josephus are history, and that's different when you have people groups who are just making it up as they go. And a lot of them do this. I'm not attacking the people. There are a lot of oral history in the Jews that cannot be verified, and it's not in the Bible. It's in other books. We have a whole grouping of questionable Old Testament and New Testament books that didn't make the cut for canon that are called the pseudepigrapha. In other words, these were considered doubtful or unreliable, even by the people that heard it. And to be fair, if you went to the average library, there are things in there that are true. There are things in there that are not true. That doesn't mean we burn down the library. That means we just discern between books accepted as true and books accepted as untrue. Anyway, that's Psalms 8 and 15 and 16.